What's going on, guys? So you probably remember that I spent some time in Jackson Hole, Wyoming with the GMC crew driving around the new GMC heavy-duty pickup trucks. Well, today I am in a 2020 GMC heavy-duty dually Denali pickup truck. This is the Mac Daddy GMC truck. This is a beautiful truck, and there are so many things that GM got right when building this truck. I really enjoy how far these trucks have gotten. Now, whenever a lot of people see a video on one truck or another truck, or one brand or another brand, right off the bat, there are all sorts of folks who are fans of a competing brand who say, well, my truck's better, or my truck does this, or this truck does this better. And what I want to clarify with these trucks, this type of truck specifically, when compared to any other truck that competes directly against it, whether it's a Ram 3500, whether it's a Ford F350 or an F450 pickup truck. Basically, I'm talking about dually Class 3 light-duty pickup trucks, which encompass all the dually pickup trucks that all the manufacturers make. So, whenever I'm talking about these trucks, the one thing I want to make abundantly clear to folks who might be brand biased, or who may have never spent time in some of these competing brands, or may have just had a bad experience with a brand in the past and they haven't driven one lately. All of these truck manufacturers are turning out ridiculously great products. These trucks are super comfortable, they are super capable, and when you see the towing tests, when you see the competition that they pit themselves against with other manufacturers, what you will find out really quickly is that the capabilities of these trucks will generally far exceed anything that was produced 10 years ago. But more importantly, they will generally exceed anything you will ever subject them to. Whether you're hauling a gooseneck trailer, whether you're hauling a fifth wheel, whether it's a travel trailer or a boat, there are very few products that you can buy that are towable by something like this or any of the other dualies that would really stress these trucks out. Now, there is a group of people out there that do purchase very heavy trailers. If you're in the hotshot industry and your business is hauling, then it could be very important to you to have a truck that has the highest possible towing configuration, simply because the more weight, the more stuff you put on your trailer generally means the more money you're making. So I don't want to say that there isn't a need for these very capable, powerful trucks in the hotshot industry, in the RV hauling industry, in certain commercial industries. But for 99.99% of buyers who will buy this truck, even if they are in the hotshot industry, these trucks will generally exceed whatever use condition it'll be subjected to by the owners of those trucks. Now, all that being said, let's talk about the truck. I had a great time in Jackson, Wyoming, driving those GMC trucks. I thought that the trucks then were outstanding. I thought they've come such a long way. I really like what they've done with the interior in terms of back seat space. I've always been a fan of the interior of the front, the dash layout, and how everything is configured. I've always liked GMC's and GM's infotainment system, their navigation system. There's a lot of things I've always liked about General Motors vehicles, and they simply bumped it up a notch with the 2020 model heavy-duty trucks. Now, I'm not saying anything negative about any of the other brands, because I like what Ram's doing, and I also like what Ford's doing. So I'm simply giving you my unbiased opinion of this specific truck I'm in. If somebody said, I'm going to give you a dually truck, and they offer me a Platinum or a Limited Super Duty, a Denali GMC, a High Country Chevy, or a Laramie Longhorn or Limited Ram, I'd take any of them, because they're all great vehicles. I'm not going to let a brand bias decide on what truck I should buy, because I don't have bias anymore. Maybe at one point I did. Anyways, the whole reason I'm talking about all of this is because when I talk about comfort, when I talk about capability, when I talk about what this truck is capable of, it's really impressive to see the fact that I can't really list any negatives anymore. There aren't a lot of things, aside from maybe a few small preferences. Now let's talk about the comfort. Remember, this is a 3500 HD Denali truck. This is a 1-ton dually, which means it is designed to haul, it is designed to tow, and it is designed for payload capacity. This truck has a significant amount of payload capacity. We're going to take a look at the sticker on the truck here in a little bit, but you'll see specifically how much this truck is rated to tow, how much it's rated to carry, and what the combined weight rating of this truck is, because General Motors does a great job of placing a towing information sticker right in the threshold of the door that anybody who is going to get into one of these trucks should look at first. So we're going to see what the total capability of this truck is. In terms of ride comfort, this truck rides really nice. It feels really good. In no way does it feel like a dually truck felt 15 years ago, where it was just a harsh, firm ride. Now, this is going to have a firmer ride and a harsher ride than a single rear wheel truck, simply because this truck is designed to have a much heavier duty rear suspension. This has very stiff rear leaf springs. Now, General Motors has taken a different approach in terms of the rear leaf spring setup on this truck. So once we get out and we take a look at it, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. Basically, they've decided to increase the spring rate of the overload springs, but decrease the spring rate and the spring thickness of the main leaf pack. At least that's what it looks like when you evaluate and you look at how the leaf springs are set up on this truck. And what that means to me is that the truck is designed to have a very tame ride, a very comfortable ride in terms of a dually truck whenever you are not towing something heavy or you don't have a lot of payload in the back. But once you load it down and those leaf springs, those overload leaf springs, the thinner ones kick in, it firms the ride up, but it adds more capacity. So it's basically like a leaf spring version of a progressive coil spring. A progressive coil spring gets firmer as it gets compressed. So the more weight you put on it, the firmer it gets. With the leaf springs here, you can't do that as easily. So in lieu of a progressive leaf spring, they added leaf springs that essentially kick in and give you the payload capacity you need whenever you have weight in the back. Now, I know a lot of people are going to want to know, how does this truck ride, comparatively speaking, to my F450? Now, an F450 has several things working against it in terms of ride comfort. The biggest one is the fact that it has 19.5-inch Alcoa wheels. Now, those 19.5 Alcoa wheels give you a harsher ride because the tire sidewall doesn't flex as much. When it's unable to flex, you lose the suspension characteristics of a softer tire. This is more comparative to like an F350 or Ram 3500. And what I can say is they all feel about the same. I can't honestly say one is significantly more comfortable than the other, because the long road trips that I've spent in all of them, they all feel comfortable. I don't feel fatigued. I don't feel as if, my whole body's aching from the jostling and the bumps that used to be synonymous with heavy-duty trucks. Even 3/4 ton trucks in the past, they used to beat you up. Now, this is not going to be as cushy as a 3/4 ton truck, because even those trucks have gotten smoother. They've gotten to be much more comfortable in terms of ride quality. But this truck, in my opinion, is probably as smooth as a 3/4 ton truck was just 5 or 6 years ago. So they've definitely come a long way in terms of improving the ride characteristics of these dually trucks. And that's across the board. GMC is definitely up there at the top, though, because the truck does feel very, very comfortable while driving it. And that's me coming out of an F450 pickup truck with really no suspension modifications. The only thing I've done is add airbags in the back, and I pretty much keep them empty whenever I'm not towing. The Duramax engine and the Allison 10-speed transmission, that's right, a 10-speed automatic transmission in this truck, feels buttery smooth. The engine is very quiet. It shifts very smooth through the gears, and it holds the right gear at the right point. And that all plays into your towing confidence, your fuel economy, just about everything in terms of owning a truck like this that you want to improve. Going to a 10-speed automatic transmission has really only helped this heavy-duty truck, mainly because it's in the right gear at the right time for the right situation. And that is the real key behind this Allison 10-speed transmission. Now, this 6.6-liter Duramax diesel produces 445 horsepower and 910 pound-feet of torque. So in terms of the horsepower and torque war, it's the only heavy-duty truck that doesn't have an offering over or at 1,000 pound-feet of torque. Now, that's not a big deal overall, because if you're looking at Ram, you have to get a specific configuration of the truck to have 1,000 pound-feet of torque. Every GMC truck you get with the 6.6 liter is going to have the 910 pound-feet of torque, which is actually greater than what you get on a lower package or a non-high output Cummins engine in a Ram truck. So you can't really make the argument that Ram is across the board at a higher torque rating than GMC, because GMC, again, has a higher torque number for the volume truck that people would buy from Ram. You know, when it comes to power and towing, and it comes to really what people use this for, hauling a big fifth wheel, hauling a gooseneck, hauling a boat, things like that, all these trucks do such a great job towing. You're really not going to stress any of them out, with 99% of the trailers people will ever hitch up to something like this. Most of them being in the 19,000 GVWR all the way up to about 25,000 GVWR. Now, if you're in it for hot shotting, you might get up to 30,000 pound GVWR, but in most cases, that's a stretch. It's not going to be the norm. This specific truck with this configuration gives you a tremendous amount of towing, tremendous amount of payload, and quite frankly, if you're looking at potentially getting a big, large fifth wheel that's heavy, this would be a great truck to pair to it. Now, you know, my only real suggestion to GMC when it comes to this truck is to find a way to put a wide track front end on it. Find a way to maybe put the front end that they have on their 5500, 6500 truck and integrate it into this truck somehow, just so you get that tighter turning radius. Because in my case, it's so hard to switch from an F450 with that crazy good turning radius to a truck that doesn't have it. All these trucks do a reasonable job turning, especially for the size they are, but the more they can improve that maneuverability, just the more use a lot of people can get out of these trucks. It makes backing into RV parks, it makes backing up large gooseneck trailers. Whether you're doing it for your general buyer or whether you're doing it for a commercial buyer, having a very aggressive turning ratio, I think, is probably a huge deciding factor when buying a truck. Now let's take a moment and talk about some things that I think could be improved on this truck. I mean, there's so many things I like about it, but what could be done a little different that I think would make the truck a little better? So, of course, the one I just mentioned, the improved turning radius, that's not something you might need to go to a wide track suspension to do, but if you can accomplish that with the normal axle or the normal front independent suspension setup that's on here, then that would be great. Number two would be something that I would recommend for both Ford and General Motors, and that would be nicer looking wheels. You know, I like these wheels for the most part, but I do think that they could improve the design, as could Ford. I mean, quite frankly, I think the wheels that you can get on the Ram look so much nicer, and to have at least a different option other than this style of aluminum wheel on such a high trim truck, I think would be refreshing. So, you know, maybe a different style of wheel, a different design. I think the hoods are becoming a little bit too aggressively tall. They're definitely harder to look over. You pretty much need to have the camera systems and the parking sensors up front to really see what's going on up there. If you haven't driven one of these new trucks and you don't know how tall these hoods are, when you pull up to a barrier, when you pull up in a parking lot, you might think you're right up against something, or you might think you're really far away from it. When you get out, you're probably not as close or not as far as you might have thought. And part of that is simply because it's so hard to tell when looking over these hoods. And that is kind of something they're all dealing with. All these hoods are getting so massive. They're definitely taller than they've ever been, and it kind of poses a little bit of a visibility issue. The next one is also a gripe that I have against really all the manufacturers, and it's how high the bed rails are. These trucks have gotten so tall, and with that increase in height, it makes it difficult in some cases to hitch up to some fifth wheels, some RVs in general, simply because you're dealing with a bed rail height that's very hard to get the type of clearance you need to safely tow a fifth wheel. So having the option to perhaps have a reduced rear suspension height, I think would be great. I know Ford recently did that on their new Super Duty, where the back end and the whole suspension in general is about 1.5 inches lower than it used to be, which definitely is an improvement, but in many ways I don't think it's a big enough improvement. I think that should be an option to where you can have a suspension that might be 2 to 3 inches lower than the traditional suspension if you option for it. Not everyone's going to want it, but some people who tow would definitely like a truck that sits a little bit lower. Plus, it makes it easier getting things in and out of the bed, I believe. And I know that I harp on this with my truck as a negative, but it would still be nice to have a Alcoa larger wheel option for these trucks. 17-inch wheels, you know, that's kind of the normal dually wheel that you've always gotten on dually trucks, at least newer dually trucks. I mean, they were actually smaller than that in the past. But having a 19.5 or a 20-inch wheel option on these trucks from the factory, especially a Denali, right? The Denali name has always been kind of synonymous with big wheels, flashiness. I think having a 20-inch dually wheel available from the factory on a truck like this would be great, without having to go to a 10-lug bolt pattern, without having to dramatically change the package of the truck. Just basically have a 20-inch wheel option. I think that would be really nice. Okay, so I found one other little gripe, and it's the fact that I can't adjust the height of the seat belt here. I think that having a adjustable height right here would be a really nice improvement, and I can't. So there's the other gripe. But aside from that, I don't have a lot of complaints or gripes. These trucks are really nice. This truck is really comfortable for a dually. I'm not going to try to compare this to a half-ton. I'm not going to try to compare this to a 3/4 ton. It's very close to a 1-ton single rear wheel, but it does have a slightly firmer, harsher ride, only because, again, the payload capacity in this truck is going to be significantly higher than that of a single rear wheel truck. So you need to have the suspension to be able to support it. Anyways, guys, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've enjoyed, you know, my perspective of the GMC Denali truck. This is a great truck. This is what I would consider to be the head-to-head competitor against my truck. And I would not mind owning this truck. This is a really, really great truck. Anyways, guys, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we will talk to you again very soon.